podcast show for business owners and managers who are passionate about developing people and growing a successful business. And now here's your host, Alistair Booth from the HR Booth.
Welcome to our latest podcast. Delighted to be joined by Jonny today. And Jonny's going to tell us a little bit about himself and his organisation in a minute. But the reason that we've got Jonny on the podcast is that April is Stress Awareness Month. And obviously at the HR Booth, we're big advocates of promoting good mental health and trying to encourage our clients and the employers that we work with to be the best that they can in terms of looking after their teams. So Jonny is a special guest this month, and he is from Change Mental Health. So welcome, Jonny. Thanks for giving up your valuable time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Ali.
No bother. Good to have you on board. And really just, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jonny. We were obviously kind of chatting off air a second ago. So just tell us a little bit about, who you are, where you're based and what you do, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So, Jonny, I work for a charity called Change Mental Health. We're a mental health charity that works right across Scotland. As you can tell from my accent, as I said to you before, I'm not actually from this wonderful side of the border. So I'm not from Scotland, although I've got a lot of Scottish relatives. But yeah, Change Mental Health are an amazing charity. We've been around for over 50 years now. We started off life as the National Schizophrenia Fellowship, and then subsequently became Supporting Mind Scotland. There'll be a lot of people out there actually that might have heard of Supporting Mind Scotland.
I recognise that name. Yeah.
And we were that for a long time. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I think 2022, we rebranded as Change Mental Health. But yeah, throughout our whole life, as a charity, we've been really focused on supporting people with severe and enduring mental health issues across the kind of whole range of things that people might associate with mental health, whether it's anxiety, depression, or sometimes the more acute end, things like psychosis. Or we work with people who maybe hear voices, and also people that might be experiencing things like suicidal thoughts and so on. We work right across the whole range. We're a national charity, so cover the whole of Scotland, have a really strong presence up in the Highlands, including right up into islands and really rural communities. Work with over 10,000 people a year. So we do a lot of good work. And I know we're going to talk about this in a bit, but one of the things I'm really excited about is that we support a lot of people, but we also do it in a lot of different settings. So a lot of our work happens out in the community, but we also have, resource centres, places that people come to work with us. But increasingly, and even more so over the next period of time, we're going to be doing a lot more work in workplaces right across Scotland. Which is something that we're really excited about, really passionate about. We think there's a huge amount of positive impact and also need in workplaces, and I think we're really looking forward to doing that too. So
anything we can do to help with that. We obviously work with a lot of businesses in Scotland, Jonny, so if there's any introductions, obviously this podcast will go out in our kind of newsletter and on our social media kind of channels as well. So if there's things that we can do there to raise awareness, we'll certainly do that. So good. So you mentioned there, obviously 10,000 people. That is a lot of people to try and support as a charity. So kind of just chat us through some of the kind of settings that includes, what you kind of do there.
Yeah. So it is a lot of people, and we've not got a huge team. So we've got a team of about 200. So the sort of stuff we offer. So we do a lot of work out in the community, as I say, through some things that we call outreach services. So that's where we might, people, they'll be referred to us through a whole range of different pathways, for a whole range of different reasons, and depending on what their needs are and where they're based will kind of dictate the sort of support we might offer. But yeah, that could look like outreach support, where we go and work one-to-one with people, or one-to-two with people out in the community, in community settings, or other places. We also do resource centres where people come to us and they'd be able to get a whole range of different types of support and development, and that could be around their mental health, but it could be around things like employability too. We have a community link worker service up in the Highlands where we work really, really closely with GPs. And those community link workers play a really, really interesting and important role to help connect patients with the support that they would really benefit from and need. Then we also deliver a number of kind of national programs, one called Distress Brief Intervention, which provides people who are have quite an acute need with some short-term but really targeted support for a couple of weeks to kind of help them get through a period before they can get some kind of longer-term support. We have an advice and support service for folk who might need help around welfare and benefits, and obviously there's a huge overlap between how those things might affect people's mental health, and that team does a great work kind of straddling those two areas. And there's a whole load of other things beside that I'll probably miss. But we also have we do a load of work with children and young people. I think we work with last year about 3,000 young people across Scotland in schools, where we deliver a programme called Bloom, which is like an 8-week programme where we work with schools and young people to develop their understanding and coping mechanisms around mental health, trying to really give them kind of some of the really important building blocks and foundational understanding so that they can help themselves to and also their peers to stay well. So we're a really varied charity, do a lot of really interesting stuff, and through quite a wide variety of different methods too. So
Great. So it sounds like a bit of a mix then, Jonny, in terms of what you've touched on there around the building blocks in school, around trying to be really proactive, but then at the other side is actually dealing with, people who are maybe going through quite a bit of trauma and, have got poor mental health and resolving that as well. So it seems to be both ends of the spectrum. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because we've gone on a bit of a journey with that. So ourselves, and actually a lot of kind of charities that work in this space for a very long time, were kind of supporting people who were already unwell. People, they develop mental health issues, have mental health challenges, and actually a charity like ours would then provide support to help them through that, to help them to get better. But actually, we've got a real shift in focus to look towards early intervention and prevention. How can we work with folk before they get unwell? How can we give people the tools and the strategies to help themselves and those around them to stop getting to the point where they might have more acute needs? And there's a real shift in the whole sector actually about trying to do that. Without being too cheesy, there's an amazing quote from Desmond Tutu, which I'm going to probably butcher, but it's along the lines of there comes a point where you need to stop pulling people out of the river and instead walk up the river to figure out why they're falling in. And I think that's a real focus of ours actually now, and also over the next few years, is how can we, what are the things that we can do to stop people getting unwell? How can we put those things in place? Because there's a huge amount there's a whole range of reasons why that would be a better approach.
Yeah. Okay. So question now, I suppose, as do you feel in the last 5 years since COVID, is it just because more people are talking about it, or have you seen as a fact that more people actually need the help because of all the challenges with COVID, lockdown, isolation, working from home, that type of thing? Is that a bit of both? I don't know what the answer is to that.
It's really it's really, really complex, and I don't know if there's a right answer. I can give you my view. I think COVID had a huge impact on people's mental health. Both kind of going through COVID as a period was very, very difficult for a lot of people and caused a lot of knock-on effects around things like isolation and loneliness, which all of the research would say are one of the most prominent drivers of poor mental health. So I think that in itself was really challenging. I think there's no hiding from the fact that the world just feels like a very different place, especially the world of work. It's just changed so rapidly and continues to kind of evolve that I think people are trying to keep up with it. In terms of mental health, I think you're right. There's definitely over more than the last 5 years, actually pre-COVID, last 10 or 15 years, there's definitely been some really positive movement in the sense that much more people are much more able to talk about it. Stigma still exists, but stigma is much more reduced than it was. And I think that does mean that, in my view, more people who might have previously been experiencing mental health issues but weren't talking about it and weren't getting support, more of those people are now able to get support. I don't necessarily buy into the theory that because people are talking about it, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and more people are therefore struggling. I don't buy into that. I think that's a bit reductive, and I think plays down potentially, the severity and the realness of mental health issues. So for me, it's a really good thing that more conversations are happening.
Good.
But there's no hiding away from that. That does mean that because more conversations are happening and more people are then realizing that they might need help, that there is a real like the knock-on effect there is that the sector is under strain. You know, there's because more people are seeking help. It's really there's a real responsibility on ourselves, on Scottish government, on policymakers to kind of make sure that the funding is going in to ensure that like the capacity is in the system to support people.
The support, definitely. Good stuff. No, I like your answer there. That's good to know. And I know, you're right. There isn't a right or wrong answer on that. And I suppose, you know, that's something we might never kind of really know the answer to. But you're right. World of work is changing, and I think that is a factor as well. Yeah. Okay, good. What would you say then are some of the key projects or initiatives that you've kind of working on recently? So you touched on some of the stuff with schools. Is there anything else over and above that you'd like to share with the audience?
I mean, I could talk about lots of things that we do. I think that one of the things that I'm really excited about, and I mentioned it before, is so we're in the process, right in the trenches, in terms of overhauling what our workplace mental health offer looks like. And we're really excited. We'll be launching kind of that new offer in a couple of weeks, depending on how quickly we can get it all done. And I'm really excited about that actually for quite a few reasons. I think, you know, there's obviously, you know, one element that we're not going to hide is that we hope that it's going to help us to generate some income. And that's not a bad thing. That's something that as a charity we shouldn't shy away from. You know, we feel quite proud and bullish about the fact actually that we've got over 50 years worth of really, really valuable experience and a track record of supporting folk with their mental health. And actually, we think there's an opportunity to get to support more people with that, and if that means they're getting into workplaces and being able to generate some income from that, that's a good thing. But equally as important, and in many ways more important, is the fact that like having a really, really excellent and high quality workplace mental health offer is going to help us to impact really positively on so many more people that maybe traditionally third sector mental health charities haven't been able to access because they may not be unwell yet. And I think, I'm really, you know, I mentioned about early intervention and prevention, and I think, the ability for us to go and work with workplaces right across Scotland, organisations from all different sectors, to get in there, help them to develop the tools, ways of working, skills, knowledge, understanding, to help keep their teams well, I think has a huge potential to stop people getting unwell in the first place. And I'm really looking forward to that. And really excited about it. And by the way, we've been having people knocking on our doors for years about this, you know,
really
asking us, can we go in and do training? And actually, until recently, we haven't always been able to do that. We've had to kind of pull some things together. But now we're going to have something. And, you know, it's not just a Scotland thing. I had an organisation from Singapore emailing me yesterday to see if we could go and deliver some mental health training to their team of construction workers.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to get a flight to Singapore. I don't think I could pull it off. But it just shows the needs out there, and hopefully now we're going to have something that can help to solve it.
Fantastic. And the fact that we're on a call such as this today, and we spoke about COVID a few years back, it's just opened up so many opportunities. So the fact you can get your message out to more people globally is fantastic. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, good. So obviously April is kind of Stress Awareness Month, and obviously we touched on it a little bit there around the world of work kind of changing a little bit in recent times, and that's evolving. So what would you say are the kind of biggest causes then of workplace stress today then? We've touched on a couple of points already. Is there anything else?
Yeah, and again, this is one of those ones where you hate to say it, but it's a really, really complex answer, and there's kind of no one size fits all, because every individual is different, every workplace is different, every sector is different, and the things that might cause me stress might not be the thing that cause you stress or that someone else stress. And the things that cause an accountant stress might not be the sort of things that cause a bricklayer stress, and vice versa. However, there are some things, we're really lucky. We've got some great partners called Mental Health UK. We sit as part of a partnership, and they published the 2025 burnout report a couple of months ago, and that was a really interesting report because it highlighted a couple of things that I think I might mention. So one of them was a really interesting growing generational divide, with kind of younger employees being the ones who are actually more likely to cite feeling stress and experiencing higher levels of stress and burnout compared to older groups. And again, it's really interesting. I'm sure you've seen this sort of thing working in HR, that workers who are between the ages of 18 and 24 are more likely to take time off due to health challenges. compared, and that's 28% of workers say that they might take some time off for health challenges. That's what the data says, compared to only 9% of those who are 55 and over. So that is interesting. There's a really interesting kind of generational thing happening there to unpick. I think some other things. So the report noted things like longer work hours are happening, partly possibly due to the hybrid working patterns now, and people working from home, and kind of less of a clear boundary between work and personal time is an interesting one. It feels like in a lot of sectors there's things like lower job security, which has an impact on stress. And I think there's obviously things around the ongoing cost of living crisis and wider societal issues that just kind of have the potential to raise kind of everyone's stress levels. But I think like the other thing, and this is one that we're quite interested in, is it's been known for a really long time that one of the things that is a key driver behind how satisfied people feel at work is actually not pay. That comes quite low down the list. It's not training, although that's important, but that comes a bit low down the list. Like the most important thing is the quality of someone's manager and the leadership that they experience. And I think for me, that feels really, really increasingly critical, especially when you look through a mental health lens, because with more and more people struggling with their mental health, it feels like there's a more important, like it's more important than ever for leaders and managers to be really, really skilled in thinking about workplace well-being and mental health. So that for me feels like a really critical thing, and where I think there could be some real kind of positive change that could be made if that's in it. That feels like an area of focus.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And throughout my whole career, actually, Jonny, seen it so often. And I think the phrase we use is accidental manager, and it's where people get put into management roles without any training or support. And then what you're saying is, they don't have the training or the guidance on how to, perhaps lead properly, give effective feedback, have difficult conversations. So they're not even doing that kind of thing. How can we then be expecting them to be leading on conversations around health and well-being and mental health? So you're absolutely spot on, and that's so that there needs to be a huge amount of work done on that area for workplaces to start taking this seriously.
Yeah, I totally agree. Everything you've just said there, I couldn't agree more with. And I think I'll give you one example of a particular workplace that I think it's like a really, really easy, obvious way of bringing that to life. So my wife's a teacher. She's an amazing teacher. She's now also a leader. But if you think about teachers, if you're an amazing teacher and you're incredible at working with young people, you might end up getting promoted. But you got promoted because you were incredible at working with young people. But now suddenly you're not working with young people. You're having to work with adults, and you're having to, do all those things. So you've been promoted for one skill set. That is totally unrelated to the skill set you're then expected to have. And I think teachers, like the education settings, are a really great example of that, to show how, like, it just shows that stark reality of, like, I'm great with kids, I'm an incredible teacher. Oh God, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm having to help these adults to develop and learn and hold them to account and performance manage them and all that sort of stuff. And it's tough, like some great leaders are born, but I really believe that the vast majority of great managers can be made.
Yeah, no, spot on. It's funny, I was doing a talk, I think it was 2 weeks ago actually, and it was on that very subject, and it was around, promotion from within, which is great, but, someone gets promoted on a Friday, they don't go and do a course over the weekend, and they start their new management role on a Monday. And I've seen it, the example I'd kind of used at that talk was, the best salesperson gets promoted to the sales manager, but they're not equipped to actually lead and develop the teams. They're great at sales, that's what they're good at. And as you said, Jonny, it's a different skill set. So lots of work to be done on that. Yeah, good.
Absolutely.
Good. So what do you think then are some of the practical steps employers could be taking then to demonstrate their support in their teams, where they're maybe struggling with stress or mental health challenges? What do you think there?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, there's a huge bit is to, and I'm going to say this because we're about to launch it, but I think mental health training for managers is a really important, really useful thing that organizations can do. And that will be used. There's kind of different levels and different focuses of what that training can be useful for, depending on sectors and depending on kind of the existing skill set of the managers. But I think helping, because we're looking through the specifically about mental health today, I think if we could get to the point where the vast majority of workplaces and the vast majority of managers have a much more solid foundational understanding and knowledge around things like the signs of stress, what burnout can look like, just some good nuts and bolts foundation knowledge around mental health. We're not expecting, you can't expect managers to suddenly be qualified counselors or therapists. But, I think it's legitimate to have managers who do understand what a sign of stress can be. They are thinking about well-being. They've been gone to sessions and their developments. Someone's helped them to think about what makes a good manager and why looking after your team's well-being is important and all that sort of thing. So workplace mental health training for managers is a good one. I think the other one would be around not always easy across sector, but trying to find flexible working for staff that also specifically focuses on well-being. I used the teacher example before. It's pretty hard for a teacher to work from home. I understand that. It's pretty hard if you're a bricklayer. But I think if managers and employees can think about how they can give their staff the flexibility that's appropriate for their sector, that helps them to manage their work and their life well, I think that's a good thing. Even if you're a bricklayer, can your manager help you to leave work a couple of days early to go and do your school pickup, or to give you a bit of flex to make sure that you can go to your kids' choir
exactly.
There's all those kinds of flexibility that I think help people to feel that their workplace cares about them, and that help them to find some to still prioritize the things outside of work that are important to. I think is important. And then the other one that is really, really important is to try to equip managers to have really, really great conversations with their team. It sounds like such a simple thing, but you alluded to it before, like having a really good, productive conversation as a manager is not something that comes naturally to everyone. It's certainly, well, my team might say it still doesn't come very naturally to me, but it wasn't something that I was naturally able to do. I didn't come out of the womb and suddenly become a manager that was able to talk to someone about their well-being whilst also having a conversation about their performance and having performance management conversations. So I think some training and development for managers to help them understand what a great conversation looks like, how you can find the balance between building trust and helping someone to talk about their well-being, but also, being able to talk about their performance and hold them to account and all that sort of thing. It's absolutely possible to have a team that is both high performing and happy. But again, it's rare that happens by accident. And I think the way to make that happen is to work with managers to be really skilled, I think, to have great conversations and build culture.
Yeah, definitely. Because the thing is, what you sometimes see is the one-to-one is seen as a tick box exercise, and that's the last thing it should be. It is about that meaningful conversation, having regular conversations, building that trust with the team, and obviously if you've got that relationship, people will be more willing to come forward when they have got a challenge and being open with.
Totally.
So yeah, I definitely see that. Interesting, you mentioned there about the things that are important to people. So one of the things that we've introduced to in the HR booth is called Moments That Matter. So that's things like if people need time off for might be the children's nativity, parents this afternoon, share our learning at school plays, school sports days, that type of thing, whatever's important to them, that's something that we've kind of built in. I think it just takes that pressure off a little bit, which is, I think, it's been well received, and we're trying to encourage some of our clients to do something similar. We've tried we've got an employee assistance program as well, which I know has been pretty well received by the team. It's also got a GP helpline on that, which we've got. Some of the team have got young kids, and sometimes if you can't get an appointment with the GP or the kid's really unwell during the night, you can use the employee assistance program, and it gives you access to that, which is great. So we've shared that with a lot of clients and kind of got them to kind of see that's not a cost, that's an investment, and if that helps keep someone at work or means they come back to work a little bit sooner than they would have done normally, then see that as an investment. So we're trying to do a lot of kind of small things as a small business and trying to inspire the clients we work with and businesses we work with to do the same. So
I really buy into that, and I think there's a really interesting argument that you're making there, which I totally see, and it's one of the conversations that we have when we're trying to convince people to buy some training of us or to get us in to support them, which is that actually there is an upfront investment. Whether that be for training or for an EAP or for whatever, but actually, relatively quickly you'll be able to see quite a solid return on investment through things like reduced sickness, reduced absenteeism, people working really, really hard. There's that, the idea that if you let somebody go to their kids' nativity show, that you're just losing 2 hours of their time. The reality is, if you're an employee and you feel like your employer cares about you and they're giving you the flexibility to do those things, you're almost certainly to give that back in spades, whether that comes from passion, hard work, engagement, whatever, going above and beyond. Like if you feel looked after by your workplace, then you're going to look after your workplace.
Exactly.
It's a two-way street. So yeah.
And I see that, I see some of my team logged in the evening, which I don't like, but, I question it the next day. They say, well, I finished early on Friday, or I finished a bit early midweek because I was picking someone up from school. They didn't mind then logging in the evening to kind of catch up when things are a bit quieter. So as long as that's the exception, not the norm, but they're saying they're just making their time up. They've got that flexibility. They're quite happy with that. So, which is good.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely spot on with that. You do get it back in spades. So
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Good. So, kind of moving on a little bit, what do you think some of the misconceptions then about mental health still need to be kind of challenged then? What would you say there? You mentioned earlier, John, about stigma, and anything else? What are some of the other kind of misconceptions?
So again, complex answer, and will really vary, I think, across different sectors and different types of workplace. I think I look at, so I work for a mental health charity. I'd like to think that the vast majority of our team don't feel like if they spoke about a mental health issue, they would be stigmatized for it.
Yes.
But that's only because I work for a mental health charity. Yeah. Like that might not be the same answer if you work for an accounting firm or for whatever. Excuse me. So I think, it's hard to give a broad brush answer, but I think one thing that you do see still happening quite a lot is that there is still this sense that if people are experiencing a mental health issue or some mental health struggles, that's related to them being weak or maybe some kind of personal failure on their behalf. And I think despite all the evidence suggesting that's not the case, there is still a bit of a prevailing view that if someone experiences mental health struggles, it's because they probably aren't tough enough. And I think that's really damaging and still exists, and I think is an area that still needs to be targeted. And I think the other one is that, and I guess it's somewhat linked, but there is still this, I think, fear from employees who across the country who, might feel like they need support, but still feel an element of fear or shame about it, and this feeling that if they ask for help, it might be seen that they're weak. It might be seen as a weakness, and I think that's not a great place to be. So I think that's something we need to work on. And again, the two examples there I gave, they go hand in hand, don't they? Because if you're an employee and you know that your manager, or you have a sense that your manager thinks that mental health issues don't exist or that they're because you're weak, then you're more likely to feel shame and not ask for help because you think you'll be seen. So like those two things go hand in hand. So I think the point I made before on one of your previous questions around if we could raise the bar on everybody just a little bit, like the floor, if we could raise everybody's floor understanding of mental health a little bit higher, so that everyone had a bit more understanding, a bit more kind of empathy, a bit more practical knowledge of what mental health is, what stress looks like, all that sort of thing, even just a little bit for everybody, I think that'd make a really big difference. So
agreed.
Yeah,
we see this quite a bit as well, Jonny, where we've got some of the employers will look after where some of the team members might be off with a mental health absence, and an employer feeling frustrated because they've seen something on Facebook that they've been on holiday or that the football or they're doing, and that's a misconception, because it's like, just because they can't physically be at work doesn't mean to say they can't still be able to do things that are probably good for their mental health. So we're having to educate some of the managers that we work with to say you need to be aware of that, and they see that as a frustration and I think just a misconception right away that, well, they're not at work, so it's not sending out a good message to the rest of the team. So we're trying to get them to overcome that as well, because
And I mean, if I could just build on that, I'll give a personal example if I can. I don't know how tight you are on time, and I know
no rush at all, Jonny.
Like the sound of my own voice, don't I? So I'll run over. I'll just give an example of this. Like, mental health is so complex and individual, and so much of what is going on with people may be hidden. And the personal example I'm going to give, so Yeah, for years when I've worked with folk, they'll probably see me as a happy, quite confident person, and especially post-COVID, the only version of me they might see for weeks on end is the happy, jolly Jonny that turns up on a Teams call, and for the duration of that hour is making terrible dad jokes, being very cheerful. But I can tell you, I've experienced really bad anxiety over the years. You know, there was a period a couple of years ago when my colleagues might not have realized, because again, the version that was turning up on Teams calls was happy, making jokes. But as soon as those Teams calls were finishing, my hands were shaking and I was teary, and I was on the verge of, having to go to A&E, because I was like, God, I'm not very well here, and I'm thinking dark thoughts. But people wouldn't realize it. So I think what I'd encourage people to do is to, like, it's very dangerous to make assumptions of what's going on in someone's head, and just because someone might appear okay, someone might seem happy, going on. And I think it's again, the way through that generally is through really great conversations.
Absolutely.
Asking someone what's going on, having empathy, asking good questions, being open to hear their point of view, all those sorts of things are really, really helpful.
Yeah, no, good advice. Yeah, I totally agree with that, Jonny. Really good advice, good explanation there. And thanks for sharing your personal story there. That is much appreciated.
I'll always do that. Do that.
Good. Great. So final question from me then, Jonny. So I suppose looking ahead then for kind of changes mental health, what do you see being the biggest priorities in the kind of coming years for the organisation?
So this year we're going to be writing our next 3 to 5 year strategy. So part of me doesn't really want to jump ahead and jump the gun, right? Because we've got a load of work to do this year. But I guess one of the things that we know is going to be there. There's 2 things. One is that we want to make sure that we're really deepening our impact, which again, is a bit meaningless in itself. But so as a charity, we've grown loads over the last couple of years. To put a figure on it, I think in 2021 we were a £2 million a year turnover charity. This year, I think we're between £5.5 and £6 million a year turnover. So we've grown dramatically in both our turnover, but also in the number of people we support. But actually, if you were to ask our chief exec, his priority isn't going to be, well, I want us to get to 10 million. I want us to work with 20,000 people, etc. No, we'd be really happy staying at our size. And if we work with 10,000 people a year next year, that's fine. But what we really, really want to do is make sure that every person that we work with, we're really deepening the impact that we have on them. That might not mean working with more people, but it'll mean that the people that we do support get incredible support. So that's really important. And then the other one that we definitely know is going to come is that focus on early intervention and prevention. I think, and I gave you the Desmond Tutu quote before, but it is good. I think I do really like it. He has a few quotes, by the way, that are pretty quotable. But it is much better for society to stop people getting ill. If we can find a way to stop people getting unwell with their mental health to the point where they do need to go to a GP, or they do need counselling, or they do need whatever, at the worst end, potentially feel suicidal or what have you. If we can do things early so that people are equipped with the tools, knowledge, understanding to stop them getting unwell, that is a much better way of society to run. And I think for us as a charity, we really want to focus on that. There's always going to be people that unfortunately are unwell and do require the sort of support that we currently offer, and we're going to be there to do that and do hopefully a really amazing job. But we also want to do the stuff before.
Yeah, brilliant. No, good answer. I look forward to kind of seeing what the next few years brings for the organisation. So thanks for sharing that. Great.
Thank you, Ali.
Brilliant. So that is the last of the questions I've got. But just finally, I suppose, if any of our audience wanted to kind of find out more about you and the organisation, what's the best way to contact you, Jonny?
So personally, I would love them to drop me an email. So my email is jonathan.cobbold@changemh.org.uk. So that's JONATHANCOBBOLD@changemh.org. The other one is to go on our website. I don't know when this podcast going out, but in about a week and a half, we'll have the workplace mental health site online, but it's not there yet, so I can't give you the web link.
That's fine,
but it will be soon.
So we could put that in the show notes then, and we can share that. So that's fine. So we'll get that off you separately. Make sure that is kind of shared and put on the show notes as well, Jonny.
Great. And then the other 2 things I'll say, sorry, just while I've got you, add me on LinkedIn, add myself on LinkedIn. You've got my name, so please do that. And then also follow Change Mental Health across our social channels, because again, that's where we'll be we'll be announcing kind of all the stuff we're doing over the next couple of months. So yeah, that's the great place to look.
Brilliant, fantastic, that's great. So thanks for your time, Jonny. Really appreciate you giving up a lot of your valuable time, but I really enjoyed hearing your story and what the business are up to as well. So we will make sure that is shared with our audience, and not just during Mental Health Awareness Month, but throughout the year as well, and raise that awareness. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, thanks, Jonny. Cheers. Thanks.